for the amazing speakers on the panel today. My name is Merelda, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I received my bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering from WITS, and then worked as an embedded electronics engineer, an analytics consultant, a data science team lead, and now I'm the founder of an AI company called Melio Consulting. Today, I want to share with you my experiences on climbing the ladder from a graduate to a senior, and some of my anecdotal tips on what you can do to build a successful career in this male-dominated industry. But before that, I want to share with you 3 stats on 3 of the most common questions I get asked about looking for jobs, about salary increase, and about hitting the glass ceiling. I'm sharing stats because I'm a data scientist and that's what I do, but I also think arguments are delivered a little bit more strongly when they're backed with data. The first stat is quite a famous study that has been replicated many times and have many different variations. But the premise is this: there's a bunch of people on a hiring committee and they get 2 CVs to decide which one to hire. The CVs are identical with one subtle difference. The name of the applicant on top is John, indicating that it's a male applicant, and the other one is Jennifer, so a female applicant. For the results quoted here, John and Jen are applying for a research position at a science faculty. The qualifications and experiences between the 2 applicants are identical. But throughout these different experiments, John is always deemed by the faculty members to be more competent and therefore more hireable. And because of this, these participants are also more willing to mentor John rather than Jen. And there are also similar studies that's repeated comparing different things. On the right-hand side of the graph here, it's a study done and it's called the Howard and the Heidi experiment. Howard and Heidi are both venture capitalists, and the CV is also shown to a lot of different participants. And the study showed that even though male and female applicants are rated as equally competent, the male applicant was giving more positive descriptions, such as ambitious and assertive, while the female applicants appear less likable the more assertive she is. And she's giving more negative descriptions, such as trying too hard or being too aggressive. So there it is, girls. You are apparently either incompetent or selfish. But as a side note, there is a way out of this pickle, and I'd encourage you to read a little bit more on the study. The second stat I want to share is around the gender pay gap issue. I think a lot of speakers have addressed this today. And without salary transparency, it is quite difficult to study and to compare the different salaries between the male and female. But I have gathered and collated numerous different sources over the years and for different studies in South Africa. And one thing is quite clear is that even though the gender gap is closing up, but that is more for lower end jobs because of minimum wage. And for higher paying jobs and STEM jobs, men are still getting paid about 30% higher than female. And they're also getting 30% more of bonus. So, I mean, even though we are still getting salary increase and it's at 15%, 5% less than the guys, but if you add all of that up throughout a person's career, it can become very significant. Then the last fact I want to share is that there's this whole funneling effect down from women in undergraduate, and then women in STEM undergraduates, and then women who made it into a STEM career, and then the woman who reached to the top to the senior executive leaderships. And the fact is that for every 1 senior executive that is a female, there are 5 other males. So this means that one female exec are just up top by themselves most of the time. They're either forced to do golfing to sign a deal, or they don't get invited at all because apparently girls don't like to golf. So research also shows that people tend to hire and promote others that are like them. So if there are less female on top, which means it could mean that there are less female being hired and promoted because of this lack of representation. I'm not really sharing these stats to tell you to throw your hands and give up, because no, women don't throw our hands and give up against that adversity. We find different ways to get what we want. And that brings me to my first story. For any girl who studied STEM degree, going into the workplace is going to have exactly the same challenge as in school. For my first job, besides the PA and the receptionist, there are no other girls. Then at my second job, from what I've gathered, there's almost always only 3 girls in the department. And for half the time of me being there, I was the only one. It really wasn't all bad. At the company retreat, everyone have to share a room, but I can get my own room because I'm the only girl. It's not like I don't get along with my colleagues at all. And the reason for me leaving either of those jobs weren't because of lack of diversity. I was quite lucky. I didn't encounter any glass ceilings and only mild sexism and misogynism at my previous job. But maybe because I was too junior to hit any ceiling, but also maybe that wasn't really luck. Maybe I dodged the bullet because I chose the company right. I was chatting to a very close girlfriend of mine who is now battling with a very misogynistic boss, and she was the one recommending me to talk about this in this talk. And her question was, how do you identify a misfit of company culture in terms of diversity before you join them? Like I said, it's going to be pretty much impossible to find a gender balanced company in the STEM field. They just don't exist yet. But there are ones that recognize the problem and are being very human about it. I'd really recommend before going into the interview, do some homework around the company leadership. Are there any senior female leadership? If not, it really is worth bringing it up in the interview process and ask them, what are their plans about diversity and inclusion? You're probably wondering, well, that's way too risky. What if they think I'm being very difficult and don't want to hire me? Well, then I would say that you dodged a bullet yourself. It will be very easy, well, not very easy, but a lot easier to build a career in a place that wants to help build you up and give you the support that you need rather than hamper your growth. Imagine you've built something meaningful. Imagine you could have built something meaningful 5 years later at a company who fostered you rather than grinding your 5 years at a company and never getting anywhere. Another one is to really look around for the red flags. And if you think those red flags are important to you, do not dismiss them. I was once interviewing for an electronics engineer position and everything was going so well until the interviewer asked me with a straight face, as a female, how do you handle conflict? I was super taken aback because what do you mean as a female? As if being a female, I'm less emotionally adept to handle my own conflict. And there was also a consulting position and interviewed once. For some context, it was for a mining department at this big consulting company. And before we closed off the interview, the partner who interviewed me asked, would you be able to handle men always staring at you? We had a pretty blonde here before, but she quit very quickly. The question was never the problem. It is fair for them to know that if Heidi can handle stress that comes with the job. But the problem was the way they asked it, as if it was the pretty blonde's responsibility to tolerate inappropriate behavior from the client. I mean, if I know my colleagues weren't going to stand up for me, then I sure as hell won't want them to be my colleagues. This is a very controversial advice, and I really wish I never had to give one, but I have seen my friends struggle with equal opportunities, struggled with offhand remarks, battle with going through the glass ceiling, getting a more flexible environment. But if it is your dream job, please, please, please go and fight for it. But if it isn't, there are still plenty of good companies out there that would be begging for your talent. The other story I want to share is also one of my other girlfriend who asked me. She felt that she was getting underpaid and was not sure how to ask for an increase. I know my friend, as most other women, are quite terrible at getting straight to the point. And to give you a little bit of context of who she is like, she thought that if she had told her boyfriend that she was taking the day off for work to relax, he would be smart enough to figure out that she wanted him to take the day off with her. Obviously, he didn't figure it out, and your company isn't your boyfriend. They hired you to generate some business value, not because they have too much TLC and don't know who to give it to. In the real world, you have to fight for what you want, or nobody else will pick up the hint and fight for you. On that note, there are also these alternative approaches that I've seen people try. My boyfriend, for one, at his first job, after 3 months of working there, I mean, he hasn't even passed his probation. He walked into the CTO's office and told him that he thinks he's being underpaid and he deserves a raise. He literally had zero evidence and zero street cred to back it up, but he somehow got his way. It was probably because he was very good at what he does and genuinely underpaid, but I really would never recommend anyone doing that. To be honest, one of our grad in my previous company did that, and he's still a running joke amongst the seniors. So anyway, on how to get that increase or promotion, follow the 3 simple, easy steps here. First one is to figure out if there's a gap or a problem in your team, in your department, in your company. If you are a good employee, you should have spotted it already, but speak to your colleagues and your managers and see if they agree, and then try to do something proactive about it. Nobody likes anyone who speaks more than what they can do. Secondly, preparation wins the fight. The company hired you to improve the bottom line, and if you can communicate and show your value, they will be fair about it. If you indeed do more and achieve more than your peers, then of course you should get paid more than they do. Most companies have the salary band thing, and the reason why it's a band and not a number, it's because there's always room to adjust for stellar performance. And thirdly, in your negotiation, be humble and remember this. Nobody owes you anything. If your request is denied, ask them if there's something that you can do and you can help to work on. Express your willingness to learn and help build the company. Then, even though you might not be getting the promotion now, you will definitely be getting a bigger role in the future. The last one I want to share is a little epiphany I had last year. Picture this. I started a new role in this new area. I was the only data scientist on the project and probably the only person with less than 10 years of work experience, like way less than 10 years of work experience. I was super eager, so I arrived early to the meeting and stood around as the previous meeting was closing out. And then as our meeting time approached, more attendees started to turn up than anticipated. And very quickly, people began to realize that the 30-seater conference room wasn't going to fit the 50 people that showed up. As the previous meeting finished and those occupants cleared the room, I stood around as a newbie, watching the interactions between all of these people who are coming. Some people, I have no idea who they are or how important they are, started filing into the room and kind of automatically decided on their own pecking order. There are ones who never blinked and just went straight for the table. There are also some who lingered around and observing what others are doing. And then there are also those who directly walked and sit against the wall. I was one of the first to enter the room, so all of a sudden I felt like I have a very important decision to make. Do I take Sheryl Sandberg's advice and take a seat at the table, which is definitely where I don't feel like I belong, or I could test the water next time rather than taking this big audacious move in my first appearance in this meeting? As more people filled up around the table, I decided, okay, what the heck? Then I lifted my chin up, straightened my skirt, and sat down at the table. Nobody even looked at me twice or gave me the funny eye. So the first quarter of the meeting, I was so chuffed that I didn't disappoint Sheryl and I blended in. Then for the second quarter of the meeting, I tried to listen as closely as I could, but to be honest, I had no idea what was happening. Then towards the end of the meeting, something unexpected happened. There was a question that was raised around predictive analytics, and the meeting chair looked at me across the table and asked Merelda, as our data science specialist, how would you tackle the issue? I gave my 2 cents. Some people raised their eyebrows, some people nodded, and most people probably were thinking about their lunch. But I know compared to before the meeting, there are now at least 5 more people who know who I am, Merelda, the data science specialist. I know that if I sat at the corner of the room and not across him at the table, my name would never be mentioned. And from that day, I always bring my own chair to the table. So lastly, I want to leave you with this as literally as metaphorically. Sit at the table, be patient, listen closely, and be ready to shine. Thank you so much, everyone. And if you have any questions, you can reach me at merelda@melio.ai.